Welcome to our fourth episode of Sunrise Eastern Ontario, where the sun rises first in all of the province. And I'm joined today by my regular guests and good friends and colleagues from Eastern Ontario, Stéphane Sarrazin, Nolan, Quinn. And today we're really excited. We have the Dean of our Eastern Ontario Caucus, the longest serving member in our region, and someone who has been a steadfast fighter, not just for his constituents of Renfrew, Nipissing, and Pembroke, but also for all of us in our region, and has been a tremendous mentor to us, John Yakabuski.
Hey. Great to be here. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're so excited to have you as our first caucus guest.
First one.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. We had Bob Brensman last week.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So
that would have been a great chat.
Well, it was great. It was right after you moderated his book launch here in Toronto. Right. And we talked about how strong our region was and some of the great things that we were all able to accomplish together. So we're really happy to have you, John, as, like I said, a friend, somebody who has been a champion for the military. You have been a champion for women's rights. I was women's minister, as you know, and we did a lot of work together for the safety and security of women in your community. And, of course, the first file I think we ever worked on was for the Phoenix Center for Children and Youth in your constituency, and that would have been in 2006.
That was a long time back, yeah.
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 But you've been working on a number of things. I know
they do tremendous work, not just in, I know they're centered in Pembroke, but they do tremendous work for everybody in Renfrew County.
Yeah.
A great organization for children and families.
So I know the guys have a few questions for you. I'll have a few questions. I'll actually have some more statements for you.
All right.
But before we get started on that, Stéphane, tell us, what did you do last week? Where are you going this weekend? And what are we expecting from Stéphane Sarrazin?
It's going to be a busy weekend. We have like 2 Christmas parade, and it's going to be fun, of course. And we'll be, I don't know what we're going to do, how we're going to decorate the car or whatever, but I'm sure it'll be fun, and we'll be giving candies to children, and it's going to be a great
Are you dressing up as Santa?
I'm not.
Okay.
I have everything to, dress up like Santa, but I'm not. I will wait till it gets closer to Christmas.
Now, and what about you, Nolan, as Santa's little helper? What are you up to?
Oh, this weekend my actual son's in a hockey tournament in Ottawa, so it's going to be juggling a few events and then trying to get to at least one of his games.
Yeah, you're going to pop by my house on Sunday, aren't you?
Yes, for brunch as well. And then last weekend I did a Safe Talk suicide prevention awareness training with Canadian Mental Health Association, so that was really good. There were about 20 men in the room because men are more prevalent to suicide in that regard. It's 5 to 1, so the training was really good.
Yeah. And this week, what are we expecting from the Yaktastic Miracle Whip Yacker-doodle-doo on Yakabuski?
Saturday, I've got a very busy day. I'm starting with an OTF announcement in Killaland, and then 2 different Santa Claus parades. And you know how big the riding is, so it means you've got a lot of travel. In fact, I'll do the Cobden parade without my wife Vicky. Come home, pick up Vicky, and we'll do the Pembroke parade as an evening parade. And then on Sunday, a pretty unique event. It's got nothing to do with politics. Well, I shouldn't say that. Everything has something to do with politics, as you know. But I'm actually doing a podcast with Sean Conway, my predecessor.
And cousin.
And cousin.
You're cousins with everybody.
That's right.
There, eh?
And it's pretty much. And it's going to be about the kind of the Yakabuski family history, going back to my great-great-grandfather.
Wow.
And both in politics and business. My grandfather started the business in Barry's Bay in 1918. So we sold the business in 2001. So there was a lot of history in business. And then, of course, the history in politics and my father and myself and Sean's grandfather as well. So they're all related.
No kidding.
Yeah, Sean's.
So 4 of you just basically dominated one area. Like the Sopranos.
All came from Barry's Bay. All came from Barry's Bay. And Sean's grandfather was the MPP from 1929 to 45. Then there was this 18-year gap till 1963 when my father was elected. Then Sean and my dad covered 2 different ridings simultaneously. And in 1987, when my dad passed away, then it was a single riding, and Sean represented it until 2003 when I was elected. And on opposite sides of the political
Well, that's what you like. The Yakabuskis, don't ever confuse them with people who don't play both sides here. Is what we're hearing here.
I mean, so Tom Murray, Sean Conley, Liberals, Paul Yakabuski, and myself, progressive conservatives. So, I mean, that in itself could be a 7-hour podcast, but I think we're doing about an hour and a half up on Sundays.
So that's an incredible.
It's going to be very interesting. And my sister Karen is going to join us.
Oh, good.
And a longtime employee of us, Roseanne Visutsky, who worked 38 years for my parents and then me, is going to join us as well. So it should be a great.
So Roseanne will dish all the gossip.
That's well. There you go.
Quinn.
Well, Roseanne is pretty quiet, but hopefully she'll loosen up a little bit under those circumstances.
Well, you're going to have to make sure that you and Sean share it with your networks in both the political parties so that it can get out, because it is a tremendous political history story for the entire province, if not the entire country. I mean, I don't think we've seen a family dominate politics in one constituency quite like that. Oh. And I think you also have to let Steve Paikin know, because, as sort of the resident historian around this part, he would probably love to hear.
Well, Paikin actually approached me one time and wanted to do something about my family, not just the politics, but some of the other things they've done, like, my brother Conrad, his history with the media, Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, and then back to the Globe in Montreal. Represented the Globe in Washington during one of the presidential elections. Other siblings that have, my brother Mark was the president of the Insurance Bureau of Canada. Yeah. So there's a lot of things, a lot of involvement. And when you have a family of 14 children, like my parents did, you cover a lot of that spectrum, right?
Now tell a funny story about your father, because your dad.
There's a lot of funny stories about my father. But which one can I tell on this?
I don't
podcast?
Anything. We'll bleep things out.
So should I tell you the one that John McDermott told me?
Yes.
Well, I can certainly do that. So John McDermott was not the singer. That's my job, that's singing.
Yeah.
John McDermott was a cabinet minister in Brian Mulrooney's government, but he worked at CHOV Channel 5 in Pembroke years ago, and that encompassed the provincial election in 1963. And he was interviewing my father live on the broadcast after the 6 o'clock news on a Saturday evening, which he would interview each of the candidates probably at one time or another. And so I'll just paraphrase the way John McDermott told me. My father certainly never told me this, but John McDermott did. And it went something like this. So he says, so you're going to move up the ladder, so to speak, and you were a municipal politician. My dad's, yes, that's correct. I was the Reeve of Barry's Bay for almost 10 years, and I've decided to offer my services to the people of Renfrew South on the provincial level because I believe I have something that I can offer and bring something significant to the table. Oh, that's very nice. And you're a businessman. Yes. We have a very new hardware store in Barry's Bay, and between myself and my good wife Doreen, it's ticking along quite well, and I think that in my absence, she'll do quite well. I think she'll be just fine operating that business. He says, and you're a family man, right? And Dad says, yes, we have 13 children. And McDermott gives one of these. and my dad says, and we'd have been sitting something like this, they'd be sitting to somebody, tapped McDermott on the knee, and he said, well, son, it's like this. The train goes through Barry's Bay at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now that's too early to get up, but it's too late to fall back to sleep. And that was the story. As McDermott told me, I never witnessed it. I was only 6 years old when my father was
Good
running
explanation.
for his
and then
first
there were
election.
13 children.
And there was one more after that. There was 13 children at the time, and then my youngest brother Conrad, who works for the Globe and Mail, he was born in 1965. That was
the last time the train went through Barry's Bay.
Yeah, there's no train through Barry's Bay anymore, and the obstetrics ward is not near as busy as
no,
it used to
not with the Yakabuskis. But the other cool story you told me years and years ago was the importance of getting out the vote in elections, and you were talking about your dad. I mean, that's a story every kid that likes politics should hear about. Why don't you tell that story?
I tell it to every single group that I'm working with, whether it's my group in my riding or I've done it in your riding.
You have.
Whenever I've been a guest at a riding during a campaign, because I think it's so important for people to understand, as Yogi Berra would say, it ain't over till it's over.
Yeah.
So in 1951, my dad was running for election for the first time in the village of Barry's Bay for a seat on council. And in those days, the council was comprised of 4 councillors and a reeve. It wasn't a mayor. They was the same thing as a mayor, but it was called a reeve. And Dad was running for a seat, and he noticed around 6 o'clock in the evening, around supper time, that his Uncle Frank and Aunt Mary, who lived on a farm out on Pog Lake, which would have been 10 to 12 miles outside of town, had not voted. And you also, for context, in those days, municipal elections were not in October, which they are the last Monday in October now. They were in December. They then moved them to November, and now they're in October. So it was in December election, and it was a hellish snowstorm that day, as my dad related to me. So out with the Buick, chains on the tires, drove out to Pog Lake, picked up his aunt and uncle, brought them in to vote, took them back home. When the ballots were counted that evening, he did not win seat number 1 on council. He did not win seat number 2. He did not win seat number 3. He won seat number 4 by 1 vote.
Ooh.
Now, we've always assumed that his aunt and uncle voted for him. It is a secret ballot, after all, but I think it's a safe bet that Uncle Frank and Aunt Mary voted for their nephew. And when you think of the history after that, him and my mother were already building a large family, as I say. We went to 14 children. He had a business, a hardware business. He was involved in other different things. It is quite conceivable that if he had not made that special effort to pick up his aunt and his uncle, he would have lost that election. But if he would have not got them, he would have lost the election. But it's quite conceivable that if he had lost the election, he may have said to himself, you know what? Maybe this politics isn't for me. Yeah. I couldn't win a seat on council. Maybe I got enough things on my plate. Maybe that's not for me. Well, we would have been denied what, obviously I'm subjective, but an absolutely tremendous representative in the Ontario legislature for some 24 years. Yeah. And the path that all that work that made my path so much easier would never have been paved for me. Nobody would have known who the hell I was in 2003 if it wasn't for the work that my father done. So how much would have changed, not just that election for council, but how much would have actually changed if Paul Yakabuski decided, I'm not driving 10 miles in this damn weather to pick up 2 people.
Yeah.
So I always say to people, when you're thinking of, especially new candidates, because you got to just, you can't go to bed that night and say, when the election is over and if you've lost by small margin, if only I could have done more, or if only my team could have done more. So I always tell that story because that was a situation where he did everything he could, and it worked.
Well, John, I'm happy you took the drive to get those 2 votes, because if not, we wouldn't owe you, and the stories you share are always good.
Well, the best stories are the true stories, I'm telling you. Like, we know that in our business, sometimes you have to, maybe exaggerate a little bit, and sometimes you have to tell a story that is something of a myth. But these are stories told to me by my dad. Well, John McDermott wouldn't have made it up, and Dad certainly was never. He told that story so many times that it was ingrained in us. And you know what? Lisa and Nolan and Stéphane, I think that deep down, my father believed that someday, maybe one of his children would actually, it took a long time, but maybe one of his children would actually take the plunge as well.
So I have one more question, and I want to give it to these guys because I know they have questions about your singing.
I forgot my spoons.
Yeah. We're going to do spoons today. And then this is the segue from, the solid foundation that your father gave to you, but also your constituency. And I've served with you. You're 20 years. I'm 18. You came to my constituency. And, I said to you recently that every member that sits in the chamber needs to hear a speech from John Yakabuski. And, when you think about the history of this province and the green energy fiasco, for example, probably the largest energy failure by any government under McGuinty Liberals, you were the critic. You brought in experts so that we had a solid foundation for many, many years. We finally formed government after many years in opposition, where, by the way, I felt like we all became very close in opposition.
Absolutely.
And then we form a government, you become transportation minister, and I will say, of the entire time I've been here, no disrespect to anybody, probably the most loved and excellent Minister of Natural Resources in this province's history. You really were excellent at that role. And so I guess it's a two-parter, because, you, just like your cousin Sean, are considered the best orators in the House. And it's because of the storytelling that you are so focused at. But what was the two parts here? What was sort of your most, in the last 20 years, the one experience that you look back at and go, oh, I'm super proud of that? And second, based on the wisdom that you've accumulated, not only from your father, but through your own, let's not diminish that, your own experience. What kind of advice do you have for new members like Nolan and Stéphane, who want to represent our region?
Before he responds, I hear a lot of his advice sitting behind him. John is not shy to share some advice, and I'm very appreciative of it. But let's hear some advice, John.
Well, I'll tell you the battle over the Green Energy Act, and it was, quite frankly, it was the duplicity of the Liberals and outright dishonesty when it came to telling the people of Ontario how it would impact. We got the carbon tax now, absolutely, but how that Green Energy Act and the decisions that they made to pay massive in a massive overly way for forms of energy that were never going to be ones that we could depend as a base, because they would be naturally intermittent by the very nature. They could only be intermittent because they're dependent on what nature provides you, whether it's wind or the sun. And we had a company by the name of London Economics International.
I remember.
That did a complete breakdown and analysis of where they felt the Green Energy Act was going to take us. And they came up with a figure that we would spend an additional extra $40 billion doing this. And they weren't very far from wrong. But then the cumulative cost became even more than that, because as time, the more time that this was in the system, the more people were overpaying for that electricity. So that was certainly a great opportunity for us to show that we had the people's backs, and it manifested itself in the act itself. And quite frankly, I think the Green Energy Act and the hydro issue was one of the biggest singular reasons that the McGuinty-Wynne government fell the way it did in 2018. There were all kinds of issues.
Energy always seems to take out governments.
And quite frankly, we don't see that being on the plate today. We don't hear from our constituents. When in those years between the enactment of the Green Energy Act and 2018, that was one of the number one issues we always heard about. Yeah. And today we don't hear about it because we've taken that off the table from the point of view of how it impacts consumers. And that is, well, we can see what has happened to the Liberals as a result of that.
Yeah.
And the second part, about advice. First of all, I'm honored to be working with these new members. And I can tell pretty quick whether we've got folks here that are in it for the long haul, or that we may not see much of them after the next. And we've seen people come and go in this legislature, Lisa, over the years, and even before we were members here, we know the history of some. But I can tell you that these two here are absolutely laser focused on their communities, They understand the people they represent, because they walk in the same kinds of shoes. They've walked down those streets with them. When I say that in a figurative way. You've walked down those streets, and always remember how important your constituents are. And I don't have to tell you that, because you're showing examples yourselves as it is, and you won't lose sight of that, because those are the people that you actually identify with, and they identify with you. And I'll tell you, in this business, as a rural member, if you can be in a situation where your constituents take ownership of you, because she's my girl or he's my guy, whatever the case may be, exactly. And then it doesn't even actually matter. Sometimes, we saw, I'll give you an example of somebody like Peter Cormos.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what was happening on the provincial level. Somebody like that was always going to win the election.
Yeah.
Was always going to win the election. And you have that opportunity as a rural member more than anybody else. And I'll give you because you have that ability to be that topic of conversation at the kitchen table in every one of those homes because they see you. You know, you're talking about what you're doing this weekend, and I know how busy you are on every weekend, Nolan, and getting you around in your constituencies. People get to identify with you. So they will continue to support you because they feel you are the one that matters most to them because they are the ones that matter most to you. So that is the key to rural Ontario. And I'll give you an example, if I may. In 2006, so Rosario Marchese was in
Rosario,
Ontario. He was a NDP member for Trinity Spadina at the time. Trinity.
Just before you get started on it, remember how excited we were that he won that one seat for the NDP, so it was a minority parliament?
That's right.
Oh, man.
Right. So Rosie's constituency was about 12 square kilometers, and mine's 10,000 square kilometers, you know. And we were going to do a show together down in Hamilton. At that time, it was Michael Corrin's show, and David Zimmer was going with us as well. So Zimmer and I were elected in 2003. Rosie had been elected since 1990. So Zimmer and I had 3 years in, and he had 16 rather. And so he says to me, he says, so we're driving down, he says, so Yak, like on a weekend, like, do you just like goof off and go fishing or whatever? And I said, Rosie, on a weekend, that's my busiest and best times because I'm into the communities with them in their events, doing this, doing that. And I said, I can tell you this, if I walk down the street in any town in Renfrew County, people know me. I'm not saying everybody knows me, but people know me. And if one person knows you, then it gets around that you're in town. He said to me, he says, God, I've been a member for 16 years, and I can walk down any street in my riding, and nobody knows me. Wow. And that is the difference between rural and an urban member here in downtown Toronto. They never really become that person in people's heart. So when the swing goes against them, it takes them out. If the swing's in their direction, it might bring them in. But we have that ability as a rural member to be the person that they don't even think about anybody else when they go to mark that ballot after your first election. And of course, my first election, I barely got elected. And since then, I've never been below 60% because that's what you have that opportunity.
I don't know about you, Stéphane, but I can feel that in my riding. I'm still trying to create an identity. They still think I'm the ice cream guy, but I'm trying to create a new identity as a political guy. Yes. But I can understand that in the rural areas, it is easier to create an identity.
Absolutely.
And I watched some house clips of you, John, when you were debating the past government on the energy issue. And I have to tell you did a great job. Like, I was really amazed. You know, the Hydro One sale and everything, what you've done. And it was really good.
We do joke a lot, but I do have a lot to learn from you.
Well,
you are a very well-spoken person in the house without notes quite often.
And you know, that one time also that I stand beside you in a caucus meeting and we sang the national anthem, and I turned to you and said, wow, not bad.
And I'm sure though he told you he's released 2 CDs?
Yeah.
I tell everybody I can, Stéphane.
Where can they buy the CDs?
That I've released. Well, I don't even know if you can buy them anymore. They're probably sold out, but I brought one in 2000. And the timing had nothing to do with the upcoming elections, but just by accident, I brought one out in the fall of 2006. Election 2000, okay. And then I brought one out in the fall of 2010. Election coming in 11. Oh, no, it's just a coincidence completely.
Well, not only that, where does the money go to, though? The proceeds?
Well, the first one, all the money went to 5 hospitals in my riding. And I have 5 hospitals in my riding, which is, I don't think there's another riding in the province could possibly have 5 hospitals in the riding because it's just geographically unlikely. But so what we did is we did the CD. We gave them CDs to all of the hospitals, and they sold them, and then put their money into their foundations or whatever.
You did a Christmas CD too, correct?
No, I did not.
Oh, I thought you did.
No, I've been asked to do that, and I'll explain that in a minute. So then in 2010, we did it for the long-term care homes. So the first one was called, for the hospitals, was called To Your Health, and the second one for the long-term care homes was called Taking Care. And we've had people talking about those CDs. Now, I did do, and you'd be familiar with her, all the people in the Valley, you might be Gail Gavin. Gil Gavin is a Ottawa Valley Country Music Hall of Famer, and she did a duet with me on the second CD. It's called The Fireside Banks of Jordan. And when that CD was released, for over a year on Valley Heritage Radio, The Fireside Banks of Jordan with John Yakabuski featuring Hall of Famer Gil Gavin was the #1 requested song on that radio station for over a year.
That's why you were always on your phone.
So, folks, if you can help us out,
That's right. I was called. Can you play that The Fireside Banks of Jordan?
People should
Just
start
one
calling
more
it.
time. One more time.
Call it into the radio station. Start requesting it. We're going to get you in the top 10.
Yeah. Oh, they still play it. Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, it's like Valley Heritage Radio, a lot of oldies, and my CDs were songs of, I'm not sure. I'd have to think if there's anybody that I did a song on there that's still living.
Oh, well, do you guys have any other questions for John?
I guess my question, you came from the business realm.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever miss the business realm? Because I come from a small business background as well. And as much as I love this role, some of my relationships were built in the restaurant industry. And, politics and business are two different specters. So is there anything that you miss from the business side of the world?
Well, they're different and the same from my perspective, because you've gone from a business, you're still involved. But the only thing that made that business successful was what was coming through that door, and that's people.
Great.
And it's how you relate and how you deal with people that continue to make your businesses successful. We're in the same thing. We're in the people business. So when I was in the hardware business, I might have been selling nails or widgets or paint or whatever, but it was the interaction between yourself, your staff, and the public that came through that door. So when you went, and I'm sure, Nolan, that comfort level that you had with people was absolutely critical to you feeling comfortable once you got onto the political stage.
Agreed.
So yeah, they are different because we do things that impact people in completely different ways. We're not selling a specific product, but we are dealing with, and you get to really know what, this business, what is even different than your business and my business, is the broad cross-section of people that you get to know. I mean, I've been doing it for 20, you've been doing it for 18.
Yeah.
There are thousands of people that you, as my dad used to say, used that phrase, you would have never rubbed shoulders with without this job. In the hardware store in Barry's Bay or in your businesses in Cornwall, you have your clientele, so you'll have some people that are different, but for the most part, a lot of people will be repeat customers. You'll see them over and over again. I think of, one of the things that just, shocks me about this business, and different, you and I, because we're in kind of, we're half generations different anyway. Meeting people on the campaign trail. Yeah, how old are you, Yak? But meeting people on the campaign trail that served overseas in the Second World War with my father. Yeah. I had never met those. And you think of how many legions we deal with. You never would have ever, in your only singular community, met some of these people that you've grown to respect so much. And the truth is, many of them have already gone now. Yeah. But in my 20 years, I've seen people, I'm using the Legion as an example, because we're so recent from the Remembrance Day ceremonies and stuff like that. And some of those people, to sit down and talk to them, just really a tremendous privilege that we have as MPPs, because our horizons broaden so much. And I don't think that sometimes, and not just us as MPPs, but all public figures in whatever level of, how this knowledge that we accrue over long periods of time, how valuable it is, actually. And I sometimes don't think we get recognized for that, because a lot of things today, careers are, an inch wide and 7 feet deep. Our careers become a mile wide and a few inches deep, because we're not necessarily the expert on anything, but we've touched and rubbed shoulders with so many different people that we understand their way of life and the needs and wants, the disappointments, the victories that so many families You mourn with them through death. You celebrate them. I mean, how many 50th wedding anniversaries I've sung at, and funerals and stuff like that. You make that connection in this job there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it.
I have to learn how to sing because it was really, for him, it was a real bad thing. Right?
Huge. I say, I went from 645 votes in 2003 to over 15,000 vote plurality in 2007. There's no way of calculating exactly, but people heard that I'd sung at my victory party on election night. The word, it's that rural community. The word gets out. I start getting calls about doing this or that. Can you sing? I know you knew Grandpa, right? I'm not even sure if I knew Grandpa, but probably my dad knew Grandpa. Yeah. But could you come and sing at Grandpa's funeral? It's just the penetration that you get by having that sort of, and that's why I say, if there's something that you have that is unique to yourself, capitalize on it, because we have to do those things in politics to make sure that if you have an advantage, then don't tuck that advantage away. Bring it out front and center.
Is being tall and clumsy unique?
Not unique, but you're so good looking to boot there. No, okay. But so I honestly believe that if there was a way of some divine intervention saying this is what it meant to you, Yak, I believe that my building that persona of being a very, and when you're out there singing, you're very available. And every time I went somewhere, hey John, come out and do a few songs, that kind of thing. I don't think I'd be exaggerating to say that meant 5,000 votes in that second campaign.
Yeah. Because
we also had a party policy platform position that was very unpopular in my riding, as you would understand too. The religious schools issue, that the Liberals had misrepresented that completely and played it to be as damaging to us as possible. So I had to overcome that as a first-term MPP, and you have had to overcome that as 1 year, basically, 1 year and a half.
Yeah.
So you got to anything that you have that can be used in your favor, obviously that is ethical and honest, of course, but you got to take advantage of those things.
So I guess we've elapsed our time, but I did want to say this has been a masterclass in what a political dynasty in this province, in not only the modern era, but in the previous era, should do in terms of grassroots politics. And you are the king and the master, not only of grassroots politics, but also of being an incredible orator at the legislature and in our communities. And I know certainly I speak for all of us in Eastern Ontario to say how proud we are that you're the dean of our region. And we know that you'll fight for us when we're not here. And I got to say, on a personal level, and you guys should know this, whenever I'm having some of my mental health challenges, and then of course the first person always to call me is this man here. Yes. And I got to say, people need to know that, because they can see men in politics, especially from rural communities, as rough around the edges. And I got to tell you, that of the three men here, they all have big hearts, but I've never seen a heart bigger than this one's. And I love you to death. You're a great friend, just a cherished mentor. You've been house leader. You have been the whip, which I coined you as the miracle whip. I've given you lots of nicknames over the years, and most of them are nice. But you just, if you're a young person and you want to get in politics, just listen over and over and over again to what the master just gave us, because I know we went a little bit over time, but you just don't want to stop it, because he has more experience than anybody in our region. He has won more elections with higher pluralities than anybody in our region. And certainly I can tell you another thing is he and his family, despite the fact that they have created this political dynasty in Ontario that is unrivaled, never once does it get into his head that he has an air about him, because he does have that genuine ability to talk to everybody. So look, thanks for joining us. I thought this was an excellent program. Thank you, John, for joining myself and Nolan, Quinn, and Stéphane Sarrazin. And this is the last episode. No, this isn't the last episode. This is, I guess we have 3 more episodes before Christmas. And so we'll be having John Jordan and Steve Clark and hopefully Goldie Gamari. Okay. And we're really excited to bring you the strong voices from Eastern Ontario for Sunrise Eastern Ontario. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.